I guess you get more recognized after the movie more than being a ballet dancer, which, it's sort of, I guess you have less audience.
There are certain faces from the 1980s that never really disappear. You may not remember every name, but the moment they appear on screen, something stirs in your memory. For many movie lovers, Alexander Godunov is one of those unforgettable faces. Tall, striking, with piercing blue eyes and an almost regal presence, he could command your attention without saying very much at all. Some remember him as the relentless Karl in Die Hard. Others recall the quiet strength he brought to Witness. Yet very few people know that long before Hollywood discovered him, he had already conquered one of the most demanding stages in the world. His life was never simply about becoming an actor. It was about walking away from everything he had ever known, in search of something no one could promise him: freedom. That single decision transformed him from one of the Soviet Union's greatest ballet stars into an international headline overnight. But freedom, as Alexander would eventually learn, often comes with a price that cannot be measured in money or fame. Born in 1949 on Sakhalin Island, Alexander Godunov grew up in the Soviet Union during a time when discipline was valued above individuality. From an early age, ballet became his entire world. Training was relentless, competition was fierce, and only the extraordinary survived. Godunov possessed everything the Soviet ballet establishment admired. He was remarkably athletic, unusually tall for a principal dancer, and blessed with a commanding stage presence that audiences could not ignore. His talent eventually earned him a coveted place with the legendary Bolshoi Ballet, the crown jewel of Soviet culture. Performing with the Bolshoi meant more than artistic success. It meant prestige, privilege, and becoming a symbol of national pride. Night after night, audiences filled grand theaters to watch him perform, while critics praised both his technical brilliance and magnetic charisma. Yet beneath the applause, something never felt complete. Godunov admired the beauty of ballet, but he struggled against the rigid control that defined life inside the Soviet system. As international tours introduced him to a world beyond the Iron Curtain, he began wondering whether true success meant more than standing under bright stage lights. In the summer of 1979, during a tour of the United States, that quiet question would become the most important decision of his life, a choice that would cost him his homeland, his marriage, and the only life he had ever known. Freedom was everything Alexander Godunov had dreamed of. But once the excitement surrounding his dramatic defection faded, reality arrived with surprising speed. The headlines disappeared, the television cameras moved on, and he found himself standing alone in a country that offered limitless opportunity, but no guarantees. At 30 years old, he had gained the liberty to shape his own future. Yet he had also lost the people, traditions, and familiar world that had defined him since childhood. The cost of that decision became painfully clear almost immediately. His wife, fellow Bolshoi dancer Lyudmila Vlasova, chose to return to the Soviet Union after the tense airport standoff that captured international attention. Their marriage could not survive the divide between two worlds. Overnight, Godunov had become a man without a homeland. To Soviet officials, he was a traitor. To many Americans, he was a fascinating symbol of Cold War politics. Few stopped to consider the deeply personal loneliness hidden behind the headlines. Determined not to let his extraordinary talent fade, Godunov joined the American Ballet Theater, where audiences welcomed the famous Soviet defector with great curiosity. His performances still displayed the power, elegance, and athleticism that had made him one of the Bolshoi's brightest stars. Yet something was missing. The company offered new opportunities, but it could never replace the sense of identity he had once found within the Bolshoi Ballet. His adjustment became even more complicated because another celebrated Soviet defector had already captured America's imagination. Mikhail Baryshnikov had established himself as the undisputed superstar of Western ballet years earlier, and comparisons between the two men were unavoidable. Whether fueled by artistic rivalry, professional politics, or simply two strong personalities competing for the same spotlight, their relationship never developed into the partnership many had expected. Within the close-knit ballet community, invitations and opportunities often depended as much on personal connections as on talent, and Godunov increasingly found himself standing just outside that inner circle. It was during these uncertain years that he began asking himself a difficult question. If ballet could no longer give him the future he imagined, where did he truly belong? The answer slowly emerged from an unexpected place. Hollywood had begun to notice the striking Russian dancer with the unforgettable face, and for the first time since leaving the Soviet Union, Alexander Godunov saw the possibility of reinventing himself once again. For many performers, starting over in a completely different profession would have seemed impossible. Alexander Godunov had spent nearly his entire life perfecting the art of ballet, yet he approached acting with the same discipline that had once carried him to the top of the dance world. He understood that he was no longer the celebrated principal dancer of the Bolshoi. In Hollywood, he was simply another newcomer trying to prove that he belonged. His first major opportunity arrived in 1985 when director Peter Weir cast him in Witness alongside Harrison Ford and Kelly McGillis. Although his role as the Amish farmer Daniel contained very little dialogue, Godunov demonstrated something that could not be taught. His years on stage had given him remarkable control over his body, posture, and expression. He didn't need long speeches to capture the audience's attention. A single glance or quiet moment often revealed more than pages of dialogue ever could. Critics and moviegoers alike noticed that this former ballet star possessed a natural screen presence that felt both powerful and mysterious. A year later, audiences saw a completely different side of him in the comedy The Money Pit. Starring opposite Tom Hanks and Shelley Long, Godunov surprised viewers with impeccable comic timing and a willingness to laugh at himself. Gone was the silent intensity of Witness. Instead, he embraced an exaggerated, colorful character that proved he had far more versatility than many expected. It was becoming clear that he was capable of much more than simply playing the intimidating foreigner. Then came 1988, and the film that would introduce him to millions around the world. Die Hard. As Karl, the relentless right-hand man to Alan Rickman's unforgettable villain, Godunov delivered one of the movie's most memorable performances. His physical grace, sharpened by decades of ballet training, made every movement appear precise and dangerous. He looked less like a conventional movie henchman and more like a disciplined predator, calm until the exact moment he struck. Ironically, the role that should have opened every door became the one that quietly closed many of them. Hollywood admired his imposing appearance, distinctive accent, and commanding presence, but it began seeing only one version of Alexander Godunov. Instead of offering him complex, dramatic characters or leading roles, studios repeatedly cast him as foreign villains, ruthless enforcers, and mysterious outsiders. Once again, he found himself searching for a place where people could see not just who he appeared to be, but who he truly was. While Alexander Godunov was trying to establish himself in Hollywood, there was one person who offered him something the entertainment industry never could: stability. Actress Jacqueline Bisset entered his life during the early 1980s, and their relationship soon became far more than another celebrity romance. For nearly 7 years, she stood beside him as he struggled to rebuild a life that had been turned upside down. She understood that behind his confident appearance was a man carrying the emotional weight of leaving everything behind. Fame could fill theaters, but it could never replace a homeland, lifelong friendships, or the comfort of knowing exactly where you belong. Friends described Godunov as intensely passionate, intelligent, and deeply committed to whatever he pursued. Yet they also noticed a sadness that never seemed to disappear completely. Even after finding success in America, there remained a quiet emptiness that followed him from one chapter of his life to the next. He had escaped political control, but he could never escape the memories of the world he had left behind. As the 1990s began, the momentum of his acting career gradually slowed. The exciting opportunities that had followed Die Hard became fewer and farther between. He accepted supporting roles in smaller productions, but none carried the impact of his earlier films. Hollywood had never fully discovered the range he possessed, and the industry seemed content to remember him as the imposing Russian with the unforgettable face, rather than the gifted performer capable of far more. His relationship with Jacqueline Bisset eventually came to an end, removing one of the strongest sources of support he had known since arriving in America. Once again, he found himself living alone, caught somewhere between two identities. He no longer belonged to the Soviet Union that had rejected him, yet he never felt completely accepted by the country where he had hoped to build a new future. Those closest to him later spoke of increasing isolation and growing struggles with alcohol. The charismatic dancer who had once electrified audiences around the world was slowly withdrawing from public life. Then, on May 18, 1995, Alexander Godunov was found dead in his Los Angeles apartment. He was only 45 years old. The official cause was complications related to chronic alcoholism. It was a heartbreaking ending for a man whose life had once seemed filled with limitless promise, a gifted artist who had crossed an ocean in search of freedom, only to spend his final years searching for something even more elusive, a place where he truly felt at home. Alexander Godunov left behind a surprisingly small filmography, yet the impact he made has endured far longer than the number of credits beside his name. Whether audiences remember him from Witness, The Money Pit, or his unforgettable role as Karl in Die Hard, there was always something impossible to ignore about him. He possessed a rare combination of strength, elegance, and quiet intensity that few actors could replicate. Every performance carried traces of the disciplined ballet dancer he had once been. But perhaps the true legacy of Alexander Godunov reaches far beyond cinema or the stage. His story reminds us that success is not always measured by awards, fame, or fortune. Sometimes, the greatest battles are the ones fought quietly within ourselves. He risked everything to pursue freedom, believing that a new country would offer the life he had imagined. Instead, he discovered that finding a place to belong can be far more difficult than crossing any border. For many of us, looking back on the lives of remarkable people from decades past, his journey feels deeply familiar. Life rarely unfolds exactly as we expect. Dreams change, careers take unexpected turns, and even extraordinary talent cannot shield someone from loneliness or disappointment. Yet courage is often found not in achieving perfection, but in having the strength to begin again. More than 30 years after his passing, Alexander Godunov remains a fascinating figure, a world-class ballet star, a memorable Hollywood actor, and above all, a man who never stopped searching for a place to call home. Perhaps that is why his story still resonates today. It reminds us that, in the end, every life is measured not only by what we accomplish, but also by what we dare to sacrifice in pursuit of a dream.